good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for tuning in from wherever you may be. My name is Tejal Patel. I am the President and CEO of Neem Tree Hospitality, as well as the opening manager for Fairfield Inn and Suites in League City. I am here to be a guest moderator for WHTT's Gastronomy and Food and Beverage panel. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, WHTT, or Women in Hospitality and Travel Tech, is a platform that was designed to put together to advocate diversity in hospitality, travel, and in the technology industry through events and education. So welcome. We're just going to go ahead and get right into it. I would like my panelists to please introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about your company and how things have been going. So first, let's start with Olivia.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I am Olivia. I am 25, and I currently work at Claridge's Hotel in Mayfair, London. I am probably most recently known for being in Masterchef, The Professionals, as a finalist. And yeah, I'm just really excited to be here and excited to join the conversation with the other ladies.
Chantal?
Hi, I'm Chantal Nicholson, also based here in London. I'm a chef also. I've got a restaurant in London called Treadwell. I've also got a cookbook called Planted, which is a plant-based cookbook. So a bit of an advocate for conscious cooking, sustainability, and all things vegetables as well.
Perfect. Welcome, welcome. Peggy Li.
Hi, I'm Peggy. So Hong Kong Chinese. I've been working in the Michelin star restaurant industry in London for 18 years. Moved over to Dubai for the last 4 years. So SPS Affinity is a boutique strategic consultancy. So we look after everything across the board, from Chinese digital reformation to helping people to build concept, ideas, etc. So I'm very happy that I can share a lot of common things with the ladies, and look forward to the panel.
Wonderful. All right, Barbara.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Barbara Angelus, and I'm 46 years old. I'm based in Budapest, Hungary. Until the coronavirus, I was the Director of Marketing and PR of Hungary's legendary culinary heritage Gundel restaurant. And as the coronavirus hit tourism and gastronomy in Budapest also, and it's quite uncertain when the restaurant will be open again, I decided to build a new business, and from now on I'll be mentoring tourism and marketing experts of gastronomy and tourism in Hungary. So my main focus is actually the communication of gastronomy.
Wonderful. And finally, Vivian.
Hi, hello. I'm Vivian Richter. I'm the CEO and founder of Citrus AI. So we are based in Berlin, and we are a reservation and revenue management software company. So we actually help restaurants to learn these days how you can actually use digitalization and tech to enable your staff to at least go through these times, find out how you make your offerings to your guests and how you actually transition into a new period that we will probably discuss now. So thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Well, welcome again, ladies. And also, if you are wherever you're tuning in from, please feel free to drop it in the comments or ask a question. We'll be going through them and we'll try and answer as many as we can. But first of all, so I'm an outsider. I'm a hotelier by trade. And so when I hear terms like gastronomy and food and beverage and culinary and cuisine, it all kind of sounds the same almost. And so Chantal, can you please explain the difference between those three segments?
For me, I think there's a link, a huge link between all of them. They all relate to food. So I think they're probably just different terms. And I think gastronomy can sometimes mean, I guess, slightly elevated offerings in some respect. And food and beverage can start at kind of the baseline, but also includes, I guess, offerings in hotels, in resorts, contract caterers, all sorts. And then I guess culinary relates to cooking as well, mainly cooking as opposed to food, and more about, I guess, the kind of art of cooking in a way. That's kind of my take on it anyway.
Okay, So it's a bit of an overlap of all basically, but it's still kind of like the basic concept is food and beverage, and it's an experience, right?
Indeed, yeah, experiential as well. I think has a key part of, I guess, the gastronomy side of it in particular, and food and beverage.
Okay, perfect. Well, so let's just dive in now, please. We can start with Olivia and go around the horn, but please let us know, walk us through what the industry and business has been like before there was any mention of COVID was on the horizon versus when it started making its rounds on the rumors mill, and what it was like when it finally impacted your business and area.
So I think it's very, very interesting. Obviously, I work in a big hotel, and so a lot of our clients and guests do come from overseas, and we've got a massive majority from America and kind of Arab Emirates. And I think, I would say 4 to 5 weeks prior to lockdown, we were really starting to see the effects of people not traveling, cancelling group events. There were weddings being cancelled, big events of 200-300 people plus were all being cancelled, and it was really quite interesting to kind of see. And we hadn't really seen the coronavirus in London at that point, and so it was, it started to affect us from something that we couldn't really see. And I think it's scary for us to kind of see our restaurants in London that are so special to us empty. And it was almost something that kind of, I feel, really hit us in quite a shocking way. And I think we probably didn't expect it to have this effect on us. And I think as talking from London especially, we thought we'd be safe and it wouldn't affect our restaurants especially, and it wouldn't affect our economy. And then, 3-4 weeks down the line, there were no guests in restaurants. There's nobody staying in hotels. And then obviously we entered the lockdown period, and that has seen forced closures on all of our restaurants, on our hotels. And so now I think it's about looking forward and seeing how we can get all of the infrastructure up and running again in a safe way, and making sure that all of the guests that we had before want to come back, want to, eat out, want to, socially distancing, but want to go out and do social things with their friends that they haven't been able to see for 3 or 4 months, and slowly start to kind of put that train back on the tracks and try to rectify the damage. And we're basically starting from fresh now, it's nerve-wracking, but I think for some people it's a new challenge, and that is kind of exciting as well.
Okay. What about you, Chantel? How's business been? How's it looking right now?
So I think obviously pre all this, things were kind of tracking along as normal in some respects. I think in London we've had kind of an overabundance, if I'm honest, of restaurants in the past probably 4 or 5 years. And the industry's got a lot tougher. It's got a lot harder to, I guess, make ends meet in terms of actually earning a profit in your business, with rates having increased hugely, rents having increased hugely. Obviously with Brexit happening, all of our cost of our ingredients have gone up. Staffing was a huge issue as well, actually getting quality staff and having staff retention as well. So things were kind of looking a little bit, I guess, probably slightly, grey before this all happened. And then I think what this has brought about is a huge amount of uncertainty. I guess as a business owner, I'm incredibly nervous about the future, and that's the future of, all the restaurants in the UK. If I'm honest, I think if in terms of if we can't operate at capacity, then those margins are kind of squeezed even tighter. If there's no support with rent from the government or from landlords, my prediction is that probably, I would say, anywhere from kind of 30 to 60% of restaurants will not reopen without any financial support. So slightly doom and gloom, but I think it also has been a pause and a reset, which has been much needed. So I think this will, in the future, to be whatever that future may look like, is kind of a bit up for discussion right now. And I think there's some interesting, obviously looking at other countries. New Zealand, my native country, they opened up restaurants and food and beverage last week, and I've seen some great kind of images of kind of things looking pretty much back to normal. Obviously, that's a bit of an isolated bubble in terms of New Zealand. Obviously, has, I think, 0 cases of it right now compared to the UK, which is still, kind of pretty up there. So I think, yeah, in some ways, in terms of the future, it's kind of, if we look at where we were, probably a couple of years ago to where we could be in a couple of years, I think they're going to be very different pictures. But I think in some respects, there are things that will happen for the better. But I think a lot of, as everyone's probably realised, a lot of jobs, a lot of livelihoods have been lost, a lot of income has been lost, personally and professionally, and for businesses as well. So, yeah, it's kind of a bit of a wait and see right now, I would say.
Of course, of course. And so Peggy, Barbara, and Vivian, your companies and your services offer support to these types of businesses. So how has the dynamic changed for you ladies? We'll start with Peggy.
So mine is very different. I think Dubai, before the COVID hit, we were at a very interesting time because there was supposed to be the Expo 2020. So we were commissioned with, we've been awarded 8 projects there, and I'm still am, but because now has been delayed until 2021. So so we are the consultant who oversees in assisting the setup of food and beverage for the China Pavilion, the Estonians, several other countries that I'm not allowed to mention, and a few food concessions within the ground. So that's from a project management basis that we were at capacity then. The other thing that we do as a consultancy, and of I being a native Chinese, we've cultivated this thing is Chinese digitalization. What does it mean is the time when COVID hit Dubai was actually at the height of Chinese New Year. Chinese is the highest, would say, spender of tourists during that time, because Chinese New Year kicked off at 25th of January. That's when the whole thing started off. There was already a lot of tools and everything already has arrived. Then there were people stuck here, and there are still people who are stuck here. So I was working with various restaurant group as well as hotels, looking at how to promote their product and their services into China, into the Chinese version of TripAdvisor, the Chinese version of SEOs, and all these things, because it's a complete different vehicle. But these people are willing to spend, for example, Burt Arab, Amani Hotel, these are the top hotels in Dubai. The average night spend there is $1,800 per night. Okay. And at a high season like that, your hotel is at full capacity of 98%. The amount of cancellation, the amount of communication, the amount of all these things, despite of the COVID happen, some of these works have to be done. And then obviously after that, the whole town literally was on a shutdown. So there was until now, they are just starting to ease through. But of course, a lot of business has been put against the wall because there's no way for them to get out. There's no way for them to pivot because the industry are simply not there. And Dubai have a very high GDP that is driven by the travel and tourism and foreign investment, because this is how the places are built. So this is now put, if you say with London, 30 to 60% of restaurant, we are already seeing, and the forecast has been, currently UAE has about 9.7 million residents as well as their local Emirati. We can already forecast 15 to 20% of the numbers will be vacating this country because they're no longer able to sustain. They're not given a residence visa. They do not have a work permit to stay on. So that creates a huge vacuum as it is. So therefore, all the hotels, all the restaurants, and everything else will have even a bigger hit than they anticipated because they completely tripled their capacity to meet the expo, and suddenly the virus hit. So they're already at the triple capacity, and now with this shrinking, I can forecast at least 2/3 will be wiped out in Dubai.
Oh, that's scary. Oh gosh. Barbara, how about you? What about
Yeah, let me briefly summarize the situation in Budapest, just very briefly. Actually, I will talk more about luxury business because that's where I'm involved in. I was working for the most legendary and traditional Hungarian restaurants, which was also a catering company. And when we saw that we could have only been open until 3 o'clock, which was the situation, we didn't actually have to close. We decided to close the restaurant because it didn't make any sense to be open until 3 o'clock when we actually make our big business for dinner. So we closed down, and as the countryside tourism is slowly recovering, but the borders are still closed. So as we didn't see any possibly quick recovery in fine dining and luxury, the restaurant remains closed. Actually, I guess this year it will not reopen. And actually, this is what I see at luxury restaurants until tourists are coming back. Luxury tourists are coming back. It doesn't really make sense to reopen luxury restaurants. More the local clientele. Most those restaurants can open who have local clientele.
Okay. And Vivian, how about you? Because I believe you're on the revenue management side, correct? But also on the tech side of the business? Okay.
So I share a personal view. So we followed the lockdown in Berlin with 20,000 restaurants being set to zero in the past weeks, and now getting back to business. I think what I can share is what's quite tricky is that we are in a kind of business where you can't, it's that kind of tourism hotspot that Berlin has become in the 10 last years. And what we could see is that we have quite a saturated market in terms of restaurants. And it's from full service over to grab and go and everything. So it's small shops up to hotel restaurants or a lot of fine dining, which has evolved in the past 10 years. So we were in a blossoming market. And of course, now knowing that we can't count on tourists for the next 12 months, only on domestic visitors and national visitors, it's a quite good question. So who can at least survive these days? And of course, what we can see is that already there seems to be a large interest in grab and go. There is a large interest in delivery. But there is still the problem that we have these 20,000 restaurants out here, where 2/3 indeed, and this is the same number, so 60% probably are said to be not to struggle already. And it's not the shutdown itself. I think it's the next period of 6 to 12 months that is critical, because it's the period when less people want to dine out, and it's a kind of a fight, restaurant versus restaurant. Most of all, I think the area which is hit the most is full service segment. Everybody else can quite, cope with the situation, but full service was hit hard. And of course, it's a landlord and retail topic that we are discussing, and that will change dramatically within the next 6 to 12 months. So this is what we can share with the view on Berlin, but also the German market.
Okay, well, Barbara and Vivian, you actually answered what my next question was going to be, was what segment of food and beverage has been hit most? In hotels and tourism, specifically luxury travel and luxury hotels have been hit. And so I was going to ask if that's kind of translated into the food and beverage side, but clearly it has. So another segment in food and beverage that has definitely been declining in recent months, and this is going to be a question for Peggy. We talked about this before we got on the panel, but unfortunately there has been a decline on Asian food. We definitely felt that impact here in the States, but what are your thoughts on that, and have you experienced that at your other restaurants that you consult with?
I think overall there is a sense of PC to say skepticism. Obviously, is at the end of the day, when a food is being cooked perfectly and they've been looked after perfectly, irregardless whatever cuisine they should be appreciated. So I think the first factor is, yes, the Asian has taken a hit. It's not only the Chinese cuisine, it's even the Thai, the Korean, the Pakistani, the Indian, just across the board in Dubai and in overall. Because I was speaking to one of the business development manager of Deliveroo, and they were looking, as soon as the COVID news erupted, the level of requests, the button hygienic, has been gone up 35%. And that is irregardless of whatever cuisine. Then people start asking, how is it being packaged? How is it being delivered? So let's look at it from the fact that, let's take it aside whether it's Asian cuisine or not. I think the hygienic side is fantastic. Asian, yes, it has definitely taken a hit, but I don't think this will be a long thing. Ultimately speaking, if, as I said before, if the food is good and if the food is done properly, and as what Chantel said, if they're being looked after, they look at the sustainability of where they source the material from, how are they taking care of their food, then surely speaking, this should not be a question of what ethnicity that the food may be.
Let me react also to that, because in Hungary it was an issue in the first week when the pandemic started. People were afraid of anything that's Chinese. Even some Chinese restaurants had to say that we're cooking the food locally, and I think people understood that very fast. And Asian food is very, very much loved across Hungary. So I don't think there will be any drop in that. I think people love it so much that they understand that it's cooked locally and it has absolutely nothing to do with the virus. So I'm optimistic in that sense.
I think adding to what Barbara said, it is a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I think it's a good thing to help to evolve the Asian cuisine or the Chinese cuisine per se, so that they're able to elevate the next level of culinary, looking at the health and safety and everything else, to give themselves a so-called a reinstated image, which is, in my personal opinion, is long overdue.
Well, thank you, ladies. So we have our first question for one of our viewers, Julia Emarita. I hope I said that right. But she asks to our experts, when do you think luxury is going to recover, and that too under which conditions? So whoever wants to take that question.
Well, let me start.
I'll start there.
But I keep it short. So my opinion is, I think luxury will quite soon recover. I think it's the mid-market which will struggle a lot.
Okay. Olivia, I think you have...
Yeah, I think it's interesting because there are so many different levels of what luxury is for each individual person. And I do think that our luxury industry will be hit really, really hard. But I think that though the kind of hotels and restaurants that really are at the top of their market will take a hit, but funnily enough, I think they will also be the ones to kind of bounce back. And I'm talking very much from a term of kind of where I come from. And, Claridge's, for me, we're huge, and our guests and clients are so loyal to us. And I think they can't wait to come back. But I don't know, there's obviously difficulties with flights and now potential travel quarantine, and so I think that it'll definitely be a year or 2 years before we start to see things back to how they were before.
Okay, sure. Thank you. So we have another question from one of our viewers. Judy Maxwell is tuning in from Atlanta. She's also part of the Long Live Lodging podcast. So welcome, Judy. But she was asking, she's interested in food and beverage and culinary and its relation to the hotel industry. And she was also wondering the impact of food and beverage on hotels' effort to enhance, it says CX, so I'm assuming like social distancing measures during and post COVID-19 crisis. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think, well, I'm already seeing it happening in Dubai. So I think the difference is obviously in Dubai, we have to say there are a restriction in where to serve alcohol. So hotels are fundamentally the main places that can offer alcoholic beverages. So for us in Dubai, food and beverage and hotel, and they come like hand in glove. And so the social distancing, because they're in a hotel environment, they are able to offer that distancing. But having said that, is people in Dubai have kind of moved along better, because there are all the big well-known restaurants, global restaurants like the Petit Maison, Roca, who are doing home delivery as well. So people are willing to go and buy their own beverage and still have the food. I mean, Koya have recently just developed, cook it yourself, pack it. Is it the way I see it's going forward? No. But is it something to help to maintain and sustain the customer loyalty for them to long to go back into the restaurant and to savor the flavor? Yes, that would be my opinion.
But I think Dubai is a very special place because it's hotel driven, right? So it lives through hotel and destination traveling. While I can tell you in Berlin, so in the past years, actually the trend was in hotels to actually get rid of F&B because it was a cost factor. While on the other hand, we have these kind of luxury hotels which always used F&B as a vertical, which is important. I think what will happen in the next 12 months is that we can see a shift back, so because guest behavior will change, and people who travel will actually they will actually focus on how can I get an easy access. So what is the things the hotel can provide to me, and how can they actually help me to have a safe travel, but also a comfortable travel, which these days will mean I'm traveling with a train or by flight and I wear a mask. So I used to do that just recently, and I think it's very exhausting. And I noticed myself that I actually feel more comfortable to stay within the hotel and have an F&B experience there than I like to go out and visit places currently. I think this could last for the next 12 months, which actually brings back F&B as a large topic for the hotel. So I believe it will be enriched, and there's a lot hotels can explore.
Okay, so that kind of ties in with customer experience, because when in hospitality in general, we definitely value the experience that our customer in front of us is having. So given the situation and some of the measures that are going to be placed or already in place, how can we provide an exceptional experience to our guests moving forward? For example, I know for me, when I go into a bar or a restaurant, I love to sit at the bar and I love to see either my food being made in front of me or my drink being made in front of me. So how can I still have that wonderful experience even under the current measures? And I'll leave that to whoever wants to answer.
I think there are some definite possibilities around private dining. I think that's probably one part that potentially, I guess it's similar to, in-room dining in a hotel. You know who's in the room with you, because obviously they're your guests, friends, family, whatever. And you kind of know, if there's an open and honest kind of conversation between everybody, that anyone that is feeling a little bit under the weather or potentially ill just won't come. So I think there is a bit of a, definitely an opportunity there too, because if you're looking at things being made in front of you, perhaps, there is the opportunity for the, the bartender to come into the room and actually make your cocktails for you in front of you, for the chefs to actually potentially, be part of the process. It all just depends on how safe everybody feels, how confident everybody feels about the establishment they're in. I think, I agree with you that, dining out is an experience. And if you've kind of got someone coming to your table that's kind of fully kitted out in PPE, it kind of dulls the experience. And there's been some chat over here in London from some industry experts saying, well, actually, what is the point of opening a restaurant that is all about the experience when that experience has to be kind of, quartered or cut down to a quarter of what it was before in terms of ambience because of its social distancing, and the restaurant is, only a third full, less than that. It's not going to be particularly exciting. It's not going to be buzzy. All the different steps and protocols that have to happen before you can even, get your booking or even get into the restaurant. Even things like guest toilets, I think, are going to be they're a bit of a minefield. So I think whilst there are opportunities, I think a lot is going to come down to, I guess, the confidence the guests have in you as an operator. And, as we know, we're all, as food and beverage operators, it's, food hygiene is kind of the top of our list at all times anyway. But to then kind of take that to the next level is going to be where it's going to be interesting. And I think also just in terms of, for me, one of the big questions is, all this PPE, all these, potential perspex screens that people are kind of putting in, what happens to them at the end of it as well? Because obviously in terms of sustainability, if it's all just going to go in the bin at the end of it, then that's not,
Right.
not great either. So I think there's considerations to be made as to, what are the opportunities to be able to use that post all of this as well and turn it into something else, something interesting.
Right. So I also want to ask Olivia, and also Chantel, you can chime in as well from a sustainability standpoint. So as head chefs, you're kind of in charge of, your procurement and sourcing of your ingredients. And how has that been affected in the current climate? And what changes will we see in that sector as you move forward?
I think it's very interesting because I think it's something that was started before all of this anyway. People as groups and in cities are more interested than they ever have been in terms of where their food comes from, who made it, where they can buy good quality produce. People are more interested in eating healthier. We've really seen the kind of rise on people stopping to eat meat, thinking really about where their dairy came from and thinking about the impact that it does have on our planet. And so I do think that was something that really was in motion before. And I think that this, coronavirus is going to kind of give that a real leap forward in terms of, where restaurants source their ingredients from. We might not be able to get things from other parts of the world as easily as we have done before. And, restaurants might be more popular potentially because they are sourcing things solely from the UK and from smaller farmer kind of bases and more local produce. And it's back to kind of transparency, what the guests in the restaurant can kind of see and who you're supporting. And it's kind of, it's something I'm very interested in, and only kind of using British ingredients. And these British suppliers, they are growing and farming some of the most amazing products that kind of don't always get the opportunity to be highlighted. And I think this is a real opportunity for us to make the most of what we have in our own countries and really excel with that, and hope that using those suppliers that are closer to you will hopefully bring food costs down rather than flying things in, and make kind of countries work together a little bit more.
But Olivia, do you believe that that it's possible?
Okay. And then your restaurant, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
So I would like to ask Olivia. So I totally agree that, and I hope that local suppliers and the focus on great ingredients and produce is going to be continued after COVID. But do you believe that there is enough market share after 30, 40, 50% of restaurants will not survive? Is there enough place, and is there enough money in the market to let these local suppliers survive? So for me, it's always, also in the recent years, it has been discussions, mass market versus class market. And both have survived, both found their kind of necessarily having a meaning to be in the market. But do you think people will shift more towards mass than towards class? The majority of people?
I don't think so. I think that this is, something that we do really need to focus on, people being able to go into a hotel and eat asparagus 12 months of the year and eat strawberries on Christmas Day in London. And I think this is something that needs to stop, and people need to think, do I really need to have this out of season? Do I really need to have all these things when actually they're not at their best when they're not in season? And, I think it is kind of proven a little bit that people, they like to go into shops and they like to buy nice produce, and it makes them feel good and they feel like they're being healthy. And I think this is a movement that's moving forward. And hopefully, the restaurants that were buying those, from small farmers and really making the most of that and really advertising that. And I think that was probably 1% of restaurants. And so hopefully what we can move forward is maybe making that 50% of our restaurants. And, when we have different restaurants that are kind of going to close down, it might give us the ability to spread those local producers outwards and educate more people on where they're buying from, and hopefully turn restaurants and the buyers that shopping local is more advantageous for us in the long term, and hopefully turn away from mass production.
I think also, chefs, for me, chefs in the past years have been actually, so they kept the heritage of growing local ingredients and actually teaching people how to use food. And I hope that this will be more on the roadmap for people. So I hope we can agree you.
All right, well, we have about 10 minutes left and we're getting a lot of questions from our viewers. So first, we have a question from Leanne. She says, how do you see supporting recovery or improving processes in restaurants in the future, such as typical temperature checks, etc.?
There will be a lot more regulation. So for example, in Dubai, there's already now customized tunnel before people go into hotels and restaurants. So the tunnel will check the temperature, spray disinfectant onto the body before the person enter into the premises. So these are the type of things that is already in motion, that is going through as it is, that we have in Dubai. And I'm seeing more and more measures, I mean, especially in China. So they have AI to such an advance that even you are currently looking at a advertising board or a road sign, it automatically has a camera sensor to track you temperature immediately. And if there is the case, straight away there are area security to come and stop you and take you to the safety zone. So these are the type of measure that I've seen across Dubai, from China, looking Asia. This disinfectant temperature tunnel thing for especially hot weathers like this, to us, we think is paramount, because when you're 40 something degree, I mean, anything can spread like a wildfire.
And Vivian, since your company specializes in AI, how can technology help drive recovery for restaurants?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think globally the restaurant industry is in a kind of a transitioning period, and is making a shift from learning which kind of operation processes should be taken care of by a human being, and which can be automated at least. So it's about redefining the guest experience. And I think there's a couple of great examples, from fine dining to casual dining, hotel-based restaurants, whatever it is, which have explored that and have a great example, even before Corona started, that guest experience does not need to start on the phone. For instance, it's just one example. So it's about getting the cost structure right. And it's about having this kind of triangle balance between having a great guest experience, so keeping this very human, but being in an industry where globally we had an issue before Corona finding talents that want to work within the hospitality industry, this kind of crisis actually gives us the chance to put everything on to redefine everything and just make sure that when you run an operations company, a service company, which a restaurant always has been, so I'm a restaurant manager myself, so I love to work with people. So we never may forget that it's at least about the experience and giving people a warm welcome and make them come back to your concept, right? But when you ask me what AI can do, it can be put aside to your staff and it can help them to really focus on who sits down at the table and what else could they want and what can your staff offer them. Not only food and beverage, it's also about where to go next, what to do next. So, and to actually bring both together and say, okay, yes, I use digitalization and I use these kind of tools, but I never use them to not focus on my guests. I do the opposite. If we achieve that, the transition period will be successful, and those concepts who balance both in the right way, they will be successful.
So I think that given the current situation, it's very important that if you really want to make it out of this, it's important that you either pivot or you somehow keeping relevant. So Barbara, our PR expert, how can business owners stay relevant, or what are some tips you can offer? I think you're on mute, by the way.
Yeah, what I would like to say, I think you can hear me now?
Yes, go ahead, sorry.
Can you hear me? Okay. So, well, I think, and I can talk about luxury gastronomy and fine dining. I think you don't go to these restaurants just because you're hungry. You need the whole dining experience, as also Vivian mentioned. And I think people who are looking for this will go back to the restaurant and will defeat their barriers, their fears. So I very much hope, and actually I'm very positive that people are social. People want to be among their business partners, with their partners. They not just want to go to a restaurant to eat, to get the food, but they want the whole experience. So I very much hope that that very soon people will go back again, and because they want those good experiences.
Does anyone else have any thoughts on how, especially for those who have niche offerings, how they can stay relevant?
So from my perspective, what I can share from our clients is very interesting. Everybody who actually invested into PR is actually struggling less. This is what I can see from a revenue management perspective. It's very interesting because in the past 10 years, the German market was actually, it was driven by platforms. So we used to have big reservation platforms who actually took away the marketing job of marketing agencies and PR companies. What I find quite interesting is we see a shift in that. I believe that very strongly. So we will see more companies investing into good PR, because those are the ones who actually can better.
We lost people.
Sorry?
Sorry, there was a bleep.
So I think this is a very strong argument for the marketing mix that you should take into account as a restaurateur. So investing into local marketing activities, knowing how you can actually access local customers around you will actually be important, because these days you can't invest into a tourist business. So platforms are for some time more or less dead, and it gives you the chance to actually find out what options do I actually have to attract customers on different ways than just Google and just a platform, like maybe now delivery platforms or reservation platforms. It's quite important how you actually keep your customer close to you. And PR is one factor that I can see which helps a lot. And in Germany, there's not a lot of those companies out there anymore. So they have been destroyed by the platforms in the past 10 years.
Yeah, PR is absolutely key. Peggy, we have a question from Ethel, one of our viewers, and her question is, are we concerned about the toxicity of the disinfectant tunnels you touched upon earlier?
I think this is something to have to handle by whoever the local authorities. So, for example, in Dubai, we had a very, very strict instruction by the Dubai municipality on what type of disinfectant that could be used, and also, the level of mist that is shooting down. So there's all these things being calculated properly against a health and safety requirement. If you ask for my personal opinion, yes, of course there are concerns. But then the thing is, how do you where do you draw the line of maintaining or curbing the number against not doing anything? I think this is where the double-edged knife situation comes in.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to take 2 more questions before we close off, and then we'll have each of our panelists give some of their takeaways at the end. So our second to last question is, this is from Christina Ridge, and she asks, based on the current climate, do you believe that this will turn back the time on how amazing female chefs have changed the culinary world? Can we expect to absorb the costs into the prices of the food of food in future, should the costs continue to spiral, especially on fresh and amazing produce? So I think you already answered the second part.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's always been, as someone that's advocated for British ingredients and sustainable ingredients as well, and using kind of those local suppliers. I think the challenge I always found was that consumers weren't necessarily willing to pay for the true cost of what that plate of food actually costs. And I think that a lot of the larger reservation platforms kind of drove pricing down too far, if I'm honest. And there was almost, to kind of stay in it, you had to really kind of tweak the prices. And it was quite an unsustainable business model, I think. And, I think as Vivian said, it's very much looking towards more of the local. I think it's really, really interesting. I think that sometimes, as much as Olivia said in terms of actually trying to use and champion all those small suppliers, sometimes the produce from Europe is cheaper. I don't know how, but it is. And I think that for me, I used to feel really conflicted too when writing menus about, potentially using a local, interesting ingredient that was organic, that was, from a regenerative farm, actually was more expensive than using kind of a mass-produced, imported ingredient. And there were some things that I knew where the line was that I could actually, charge accordingly to my guests, that they would pay for it. And there were some other things that I knew they just wouldn't, because that wasn't my demographic of the restaurant. So I think there needs to be a bit of a shift in consumer awareness and education in terms of what things do cost. But I think, I will continue to champion it because it's just what I believe in, and I do believe it is the way forward. So I think in terms of, I guess, a revolution or something, I think, as I mentioned kind of at the beginning, this has been a chance to pause and a chance to reset. And I think as much as, there's been some huge consequences and negative consequences in terms of illness, in terms of death, in terms of businesses potentially going under, I think that it is an opportunity to reset and to actually kind of set your stall as to how you want to move forward, rather than kind of getting swept up in what you had to do. I think there's an opportunity now to kind of almost try and move forward in a way that works and it stays true to your value, your brand ethos, and how you as a person wish to move forward.
Absolutely, thank you. And then our final question is, it's about retaining talent. So this is from, I believe it's Greta or Chantel, and I apologize if it's the other way around, but how can you retain talent at the restaurant, or how can we call out on hospitality students on encouraging them to enter the industry? Is that even a prospect?
Yeah, I mean, if I just jump in again, that's been a huge challenge for the past few years. And in terms of actually in the UK, the amount of young people that are going into culinary education is probably one of the lowest it's ever been. It's not particularly seen as a wonderful career path, I might say. And I think this may provide an opportunity to kind of reset that as well, because people will always need food. That is one benefit, I guess, we'll always have. And as we're also saying in terms of restaurants, it is that experience that people miss. And I think right now, we've been in lockdown just over 2 months in London, and people are crying out to actually be able to eat out again rather than just have delivery. Although it ticks a box, it's just not quite the same experience. So for me, in terms of actually retaining the staff, it's very much about, for me, with my team, it's about getting them involved. We're in constant communication at the moment to see, what are our plans for the future? What does everyone think? How are we going to do things differently? How are we going to take this as an opportunity to reset? How are we going to take this as an opportunity to, the industry is a tough one, so how can we balance out some of those challenges and do things slightly differently? So I think retention is about feeling part of something. I think it's a huge part of it, and feeling like you're making a difference and that you are being rewarded for all the hard work that you put in, and it's a fulfilling role for you. So I'm hoping that we can encourage more people into the industry, especially with Brexit. We've had a bit of a knock to our, I guess, staffing levels in terms of what's actually around in the country. So for me, encouraging people into the industry has always been really important, and it's something I've kind of worked quite hard to do. But I'm hoping this may also, given the chance to reset and improve things, this also may entice a few more people into the industry as well.
Of course, I strongly believe it takes a special breed of person to get into the hospitality industry, and especially if they're going to be in food and beverage. So does anyone else have any final thoughts before I jump into our takeaways part? Anyone else want to comment on that?
My personal takeaway just to that topic, because I think it's a quite nice fit. So as a leader, I would encourage people who are leading in the hospitality industry to read Simon Sinek. He's a great guy about leadership, who talks about leadership. He gives all the great keynotes on YouTube, so if you don't have the time to read, check him out there. And he wrote a book, Good Chefs Eat at Last. I think that's the right translation, I hope. It was one of the greatest books I used to read as a founder, and about a person who needs to grow a company. So it helps you to understand how leadership needs to work these days. And I think this is something that is missing in our education programs for the entire hospitality industry. So what's the new type of leadership that is needed for new work, for this new generation? So this is probably the best advice I can give. Read the book. It's amazing.
Excellent. Well, you've already started us off on our final takeaways. So Barbara, how about you?
Okay, I believe in classical values, so I very much hope that people are social and they will return to restaurants, because, as I mentioned, they are not just going to a restaurant to eat, but they like to be among each other. And I think communication will be essential to build trust, and also to communicate hygiene, but generally to build trust around your restaurant. And then that's the method to keep your clientele. So thanks, everybody.
Peggy?
I cannot say more than what Barbara and Vivian add to. I think the other thing is we need to look at is the level of diversity in demographic that goes to the restaurant is no longer just your local. When the tourists start traveling again, they will. And I'm not saying biased that the Chinese are the biggest spender, but the certain level of acceptance of different culture and the different culture uptake on what they are accustomed to when they visit, regardless they go to your restaurant. I think that certain level of courtesy and acceptance and giving that little extra edge on making them feel more comfortable from offering their preferred language, digital menu, and etc. Those are the type of attention to detail which I think the industry has not elevated to, and I think they need to start moving on to more of these personal touches so that people are able to feel that same type of the hospitality that people anticipate to receive at luxury restaurants or even good restaurants that they would appreciate. So that's my personal opinion.
Chantal?
I think just to appreciate this chance, to pause and reflect and actually restart in terms of how you want to move forward. And I think we've all seen the perils of the hospitality industry in the past, as you kind of alluded to, Tejal. So I think it's a chance for us to do things differently. And I think as kind of heartbreaking as some of this has been and is awful, I think that it is a needed reset. So I think we need to see that as an opportunity and really bear that in mind in terms of how we all move forward.
Great. And finally, Olivia.
Yeah, I just think this is going to be a massive learning curve for so many people, and we're going to have to make some very difficult decisions. And for me, I just hope that this is going to move us in a kind of direction that we need to go, and it's going to give people that kind of push to appreciate more what we had before and appreciate, maybe just the finer things, and just not be so kind of consumer heavy, and spend a little bit more on better food, and go out to a restaurant and appreciate it so much more than you did before. And this time has been amazing for so many people, and it's just I think everybody's excited to get back and kind of see the change that I'm sure everybody is very nervous about, and we're kind of starting from afresh here. So it's nerve-wracking and exciting in kind of two equal ways, I think.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you, ladies, so much. We are all at the end of our time, and I wish we had more time because I have a billion more questions. However, thank you to all our viewers for tuning in. Please like WHTT on all the social media platforms. They do a lot of panels and master classes throughout the week. So stay tuned to this page. And if you want to see more of this, or if you want to see a part 2, just let us know in the comments. But thank you all very much, and stay safe. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
We're holding out for something more, and this is what I came